182. Subtlety. Sitting atop one of the wooden trucks stowed on the forge wagon's cargo deck, Rain smiled. His feet were dangling over the side as he surveyed the trail of carts arrayed behind them. They were linked to the forge wagon like boxcars, one after the other, connected by chains to form an enormous land train. Anywhere else, it would have been a terrible idea. But the salt flats were, well, flat. Here it was working perfectly. There was one caveat, though. They were only moving at about 10 kilometers per hour, and the plume of dry, dusty salt being kicked up by the passage of so many wheels was enormous. Someone might notice. Rain chuckled to himself, falling back to stare at the canvas awning that had been erected to shield the cargo from sun and rain. It had been 3 days since the vehicle's debut rampage, and now, finally, Ascension was on the road again. Amelia was driving at the moment, seated behind him on the control platform. Tallheart and Starvo were below, monitoring the reactor, but everyone else had elected to ride in the cart train. For whatever reason, most people seemed to think that the forge wagon was unsafe. Rain had no idea why. The ride was entirely smooth, thanks to the insane vibration dampening capability of enchanted force steel. He could hear the carts rumbling along behind them, and there was a gentle rush of wind thanks to their speed. But the vehicle itself was utterly silent. Only the soft crunch of dirt beneath its treads gave away its passage. And yet, it was completely impossible to miss. And he calls it subtlety. Ha! Tallheart is a genius. Still smiling, Rain conjured a progress report using the marker he'd set just before they got underway. He'd already seen it, but he wanted to see it again. Finally, he'd made some headway. Progress report. Marker 1, attempt ASDF 2. Marker 2, giddy up. Span 16.6 days. Character. Level 27 to 30, plus 3. Total experience, plus 397,651. Health use, 21. Stamina use, 1,152. Mana use, 396,499. Clarity, 270 to 320, plus 50. Skills. Radiance. Level 10 to 15. Detection, 10 to 15. Aura Synergy, 11 to 15. Immolate, 11 to 15. Refrigerate, 11 to 15. Channel Mastery, 12 to 15. Aura IFF, 10 to 12. Purify, 13 to 15. Magical Synergy, 14 to 15. Shroud, 10 to 11. Essence Well, 10 to 11. Amplify Aura, 10 to 11. Aura Focus, 10 to 11. Aura Compression, Extend Aura, Force Ward, Mana Manipulation, Arcane Ward, Fulmination, Winter. Mental Ward, Chemical Ward, Velocity, Suppression, Prismatic Intent, plus 1 experience. Synchronization. Endurance, 7 to 7.4. Vigor, 8.9 to 9.2. Clarity, 270 to 320. Perception, 10 to 22.3. Everything else aside, it was the experience gain for Prismatic Intent that stood out to him. Sure, a single point was almost insulting considering the amount of effort he'd put in, but it spoke of more to come. Besides, he hadn't really been focused on the metamagic itself, but on his auras. Samson was always saying in his swordsmanship classes that by practicing wrong, the only thing you got better at was doing things wrong. You needed to master the basics the right way, and only then should you move on. And so, Rain had been avoiding metamagic, allocating his daily mana to his lowest tier auras to rank them up first. They'd level the fastest, and thanks to Aura Synergy, that would boost the efficiency of everything he did. That was just a side benefit, though. The real point was to get a feel for how each of his spells worked before he started tinkering with them. For training Prismatic Intent, though, he needed to polish a single aura to perfection as a starting point. For that, he'd chosen Purify. With its low cost, he'd been able to spend an order of magnitude more time working on it than anything else. Winter's cost was even lower, true, but the subsequent torrent of mana in the other direction disrupted things. It was like trying to find patterns in ripples on a lake versus the ocean in storm. Granted, my ocean is never exactly not a storm. #Dynamo problems. There might be a way to fix that, but I need to talk to Tallheart to see if the trick I'm thinking of is possible. I'll ask him tonight as long as he's in a good mood for questions. For now, I'll just carry on with the tricks that I have. Reaching into one of his pouches, Rain removed a ball of wax, which he divided in two, then stuffed into his ears. Next, he tugged a heavy cloth blindfold from a different pouch, wrapping it around his ears before donning his helmet. After deactivating his armor's tactile transference, he called up his interface to slot the accolades he'd borrowed. 6 out of 31 slots. 6 times 1 by 6. Accolade. Everdeep Fortress. Bonus. Plus 60 perception. The wax-muffled rumble of the wagons became a grinding roar, and the smooth ride of Subtlety suddenly felt not so smooth. Every jostle sent signals verging on pain shooting through his nerves. The dry, salty air rasped at his lungs with each breath, tickling his nose hairs on the exhale. The first time he'd tried this, he'd sneezed, and the resulting explosion of pain had practically knocked him unconscious. It wasn't just his senses being multiplied by 7. That he could deal with, especially with boosted endurance. The real problem was the delta between total perception and effective perception. A delta of 10 was nothing. In fact, he was so used to it at this point that it felt odd to go without it. At a delta of 30, he started feeling hypersensitive, and some normal stimuli began to verge on being uncomfortable. At delta 50, things became worth it. No pain, no gain. As sure as Dozer loves to clean, there has been plenty of both. Purify. Status. Purify. 15 out of 15. Purify poison, corruption, and contamination. Range. 68.1 meters. Cost. 150 MP per minute. Richmond Rain Stroudwater. Class. Engine of Change. Level 30 of 30. Experience. 130,422. Of 130,423. Total experience, 2,536,316. 4 skill points. Vitals. Health, 1,700 of 1,700. 300 per day. Stamina, 1,700 of 1,700. 520 per day. Mana, 88,400 of 88,400. 172.9 per hour. Attributes. 287 of 2,690. Strength, 85. Recovery, 16.8. Endurance, 62.9. Vigor, 47.8. Focus, 85. Clarity, 320. Perception, 22.3. Speed, 9.4. Rain looked at his positive, albeit slow, mana regeneration and smiled. He couldn't help that smile, even though it was odd news. Purify didn't draw enough mana to overcome his base income. If not for the self-imposed mana budget, he could have used it literally 24/8. And it was strong too, thanks to Aura Synergy. The filth-free zone was massive. The luminescent fog didn't ramp in brightness as quickly as the spell's stain-busting power. Fortunately for his sensitive eyes, but it was still bright enough to be noticeable through the blindfold. He was making a point not to use it too much at night, lest he make himself visible from space. Subtlety would be doing its part to keep his practice covert, at least. It was an enormous hunk of metal. Even with him elevated atop the cargo, far from the chassis, it would still be absorbing a good bit of the spell. It would block it entirely if he went inside, of course, but that would annoy Tallheart. that was something to be avoided. The Savidian had been grumpy ever since the brake failure incident, seemingly having taken it as a personal mark of shame or something. As if I don't ever make mistakes. Come on, Tall Art. Nobody's perfect. Rain sighed gently, then focused on his mana, watching as it wove through the spell's framework. With his perception boosted, mana manipulation was less of a blunt club and more of a slightly less blunt club. It was still pretty bad, honestly, but it was something. Even as hazy as his view was, he could see a few places where things had obviously gone wrong in the spell's weaving. Picking the worst of these, he let the spell fade, then concentrated and tried again. Purify. The spot he'd focused on came out better that time. Unga Bungad into submission. Nice. The mana sensing side of mana manipulation got better with perception, but the mana moving side was still just as blunt as ever. Mana manipulation was a spell too, of course, with its own pattern that was presumably leaking. By the spell's nature, though, its pattern was invisible to him. It was like trying to see your own eyeball. Rain clicked his tongue, seeing that in fixing one of Purify's leaks, he had created another elsewhere. And so the eternal game of whack-a-mole goes on. He let the spell fade, then cast it again. Purify. While he'd had some success patching leaks after the fact, he found it better to nudge the spell's matrix while it was forming. Once the spell had solidified, any change risked shattering the whole thing. It was the difference between molding molten glass and trying to fix a window after it had cracked. Purify. 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 Shit. He ground his teeth, having pushed too hard on the last attempt. The spell hadn't even activated. There was nothing for it but to try again. Purify. Frustrating as it was, he was making progress. Every once in a while, the spell's pattern would come out just a little bit better than average. In remembering how he'd done it that last time, he'd be more likely to be able to do it again. If there was one thing he had, it was a good memory. Purify. It's just, the moment I think I'm getting a handle on how the system works, it throws me a curveball. If I ever meet a Magistral, I'm gonna have some words with them about their documentation. I know I'm being petulant, but really, would it have been so hard to just slap the word kata in the spell description? Purify. Granted, I shouldn't be complaining too much. I get more detail than most. Molo and his ridiculous jars, I mean seriously. Still, it's impossible to know what to expect sometimes. And other times, the expected thing seems impossible, then happens anyway. Rain chuckled, then immediately regretted it. As the pain of spasming muscles faded, he turned his thoughts to his most exciting discovery in the last week, namely that Aura IFF went negative past level 10, just as advertised. Wards became damage amplifiers. Offensive auras became flat resistance, and Purify, well, the less said about that, the better. Purify. There were a few strange ones too. In Detection's case, the strict opposite of finding was losing, which apparently meant selective amnesia or something like that. Critically, the person getting the amnesia wasn't Rain, but everyone else. With Detection inverted, he could prevent people in range from noticing the spell's targets, making them seem to slide into the background. He could even veil himself, he'd been delighted to discover. He hadn't known if he'd be a valid target for Detection in the first place, not having previously felt the need to verify his own existence. Purify. It wasn't invisibility, though, and that was an important distinction. The veiled individuals would be seen, just not noticed. If they did anything sufficiently interesting, the effect would break, and people's memories of them would come rushing back, even after the fact. say upon discovering a strip of bacon missing from their plate and asking themselves where it had gone. Why, yes, that is an oddly specific example. Why do you ask? Purify. Boosting the power made the effect harder to perceive, yes, but not very much. An arcane resistance seemed to be particularly effective in helping an observer ignore it. Still, it was something. Purify. Compare that to suppression, which did nothing at all. Amelia had reported feeling a bit tingly, but that was it, no matter how much Rain boosted the power. His interface had been no help in explaining what was going on, and for all he knew, the tingle might have just been the placebo effect. The system generally didn't allow flat mana cost reductions. No free lunch and all that. Energy had to come from somewhere. Purify. As unsatisfying as it was, the answer might just be, inverted suppression does nothing. Sorry. He'd need to run a proper blind trial on the tingling, of course, but he needed to do a lot of things. On the list it went. Purify. And then there was Essence Well. Rain's dreams of becoming a mana vampire had been dashed. While the spell did let him hoover up mana from everyone in range, it cost him an equivalent amount of mana to use, making it net zero. In other words, useless. The mana drain was divided amongst the targets, so it was basically a crap version of Discombobulate. The comparison had prompted Rain to boost the spell to see if he could make a decent attack out of it anyway. And that, in retrospect, had been unwise. The moment the inverted spell had dropped below 100% efficiency, he had become incredibly, absurdly, cookie-tossingly ill. After evacuating his lunch and subsequently evaporating his lunch with Purify, he decided that Essence Well was best left in its safe, normal operating region. Purify. As if I should have needed the reminder. Purify. Essence Well is best left untaunted. Just like Happy Fun Ball. Purify. Oh, that's a good one. Winter. Rain shivered as the chill washed over him, amplified by the perception accolades. He did his best to ignore it, focusing on the much gentler currents of the second spell. They wove through Purify's flows, guided by the matrix of prismatic intent. Winter was leaking horribly, the spell barely holding together. The second spell was always harder, and prismatic intent wasn't doing much to help. Nope, not good enough. Winter, winter, winter. After a dozen or so attempts, Rain stopped, releasing both spells. He'd gotten better at noticing his wooziness before he passed out, but there had still been the occasional incident. Yes, training with two auras wasn't strictly in line with Samson's philosophy, but it was what had gotten him the experience point. Besides, he had a hunch. Prismatic intent worked by shifting each spell circuit to a different layer, and when it ranked up, the isolation would grow stronger. His individual spells wouldn't need to be as perfect. Rain hadn't deduced this through experiment or anything. He simply knew. It was exactly the kind of hunch that a kata was supposed to give you. And it wasn't the only one. He also knew that he'd be able to use an additional aura per level. That was entirely too optimistic of a notion, so it had to be coming from the skill. Probably. Well. Rain paused, about to activate Purify again. It struck him that reversing the order would be worthwhile, given that he hadn't made as much progress with Winter. While it was harder to see what was going on with all that mana rushing in, it wasn't impossible. Besides, at this point he was sure he could tolerate a little over mana. His soul was coming along, and he'd reached max experience as of yesterday. He just wasn't ready for a Tier 4 unlock. Winter. The issue was Essence, specifically the upper limit on its strength. His paling didn't gain any material when he leveled. It just got pulled tighter by the pressure, like a balloon. Rain had shifted his approach of keeping the tear together from making more cables to thickening the ones he already had, to joining them together into a solid metal plug. It had taken subjective ages to finish, and he wanted to double its thickness at least before he went any further. Winter. Technically, there was a chance that his current patch would survive an unlock, but the possibility was firmly on the wrong side of the margin of error. The airlocks he'd built along the plug's length were designed to open automatically if the pressure grew too great, preventing total failure, but by his math, they might not close again afterward. At the speed Subtlety was moving, they were less than a week from civilization. He wanted to make a good impression for once, and that would be hard to do if he was leaking doom all over the place. Winter. With the airlocks acting as overpressure valves, he was confident that the scenario that had resulted in the original damage to his paling had been rendered a non-issue. He was keeping to his daily mana budget, more out of an overabundance of caution than anything else. Now that he was capped, though... Winter. Rain smiled, considering how wonderful it would be to let his mana off the chain. Without restriction on his mana usage, leveling most skills would be the work of minutes, though he'd likely still take it slower than that. There was no rush. Some skills were still going to take time no matter what, like mana manipulation with its shitty experience ratio. There was also the issue of essence starvation. Winter. Rain's core was pumping out quite a bit of essence these days, and the new mental model he was using was working quite well to store it, but it was consumed to regenerate his mana. He would starve himself out if he really went at it, and he needed that essence for other things. Winter. Soon, though. Winter. Damn. I wish I had a way to make essence stronger. Then I wouldn't need so much of it. Winter. That reminds me. Hey, Dozer. You know how you pop in and out of my soul whenever you want? Do you think you'd be able to carry a Tell with you? What about a Christ? Some elemental essence would be really interesting to play with. No experiment! No play! Filth! That excuse isn't going to work, and you know it. We're trying it tonight. I'll sail out there and harpoon you if I have to. Did you just send me an emoticon? How did you even... Rain blinked as the connection was suddenly snapped closed. He rolled his eyes, not bothering to force the link back open. Tonight, Buster, whether you like it or not, right after I talk to Tallheart. Okay, no more mind wandering. This time with feeling. Winter. Winter, 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 winter. Winter, 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 winter. Winter, 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 winter. Winter, winter, winter. Winter, winter, winter. Winter, winter, winter. Oh, gods, make it stop. Amelia's voice was muffled by the wax, but it still boomed painfully in Rain's ears. He winced, but not from the volume. Shit. I didn't think it would be getting to her. Sorry. Transmitted through his skull, his own voice was so loud that it made his eyes water. He hurriedly removed half of the perception accolades in time to hear her response, which began with a laugh. It's fine. You're doing well, actually, particularly with Purify. Winter, you're trying, and that's what counts. I'll take it, Rain replied with a grin. Hey, have you been watching me or the road? What road? Amelia asked. There's nothing but flat nothing. And yes, I'm watching it. I can do more than one thing at once, unlike you. Okay, ouch, Rain said. True, though. Hey, can you see if Winter is getting to the wagons? Not to anyone with people in them, even with you being the one using it. It's still a low mana spell. The forge wagon sucks the range right out of it. Just not before it gets up here. I can do this later if it's bothering you. I really want to get the hang of it, you know?
You've earned a bit of bother,
Amelia said in a playful tone.
Go on, I'll keep an eye out for any rogue mountains that pop up out of nowhere. Wouldn't want to hit anything. You can go back to being a something.
Rain blinked. What now?
A something,
Amelia said, raising her voice slightly.
Are you putting wax in your ears again?
Yes, Rain admitted with a laugh. That's not the problem. I just don't know the word.
Oh,
Amelia said.
That hasn't happened in a while. It's a building you see along the coast, marking dangerous waters. Some of them flash like you were doing. Light runes, probably. I've never actually gone to one to find out. Seems expensive.
Oh, a lighthouse, Rain said, using the new word. It was nothing like the English equivalent, containing neither the words light nor house. It actually sounded like it might be a loan word from Vedic. He made himself a note to ask myth or reason later, then put it out of his mind. Learning more languages was not a priority. We have those. Well, had. I guess they're more of a historical curiosity now that they've got GPS.
Right, the satellite thingy,
Amelia replied.
I'm still not sure I believe you about that.
When have I ever lied to you?
Headlight fluid.
Keep your voice down, Rain said with a smirk. Tallheart hasn't figured it out yet. Amelia chuckled.
Maybe, or he has and he's playing along for some reason. It's hard to tell with him. Anyway, the hatch is closed. He won't hear a thing. What's he going to do? Read my lips through the periscope?
Don't put it past him, Rain replied, grinning. He sat up, removing his helmet, then began to work on the blindfold. So, you haven't been in a lighthouse, but you've seen one before? Was it when you and your dad took a gold ship to get off Karmark? I've been meaning to ask you about that.
Hey now, Amelia interrupted. Not that I mind a little conversation, but weren't you just moaning about how you wanted to practice, and your mean girlfriend was stopping you?
You're not mean, Rain replied, removing the wax from his ears, then looking over his shoulder. You're the least mean person I've ever met, and I'm the one who should be apologizing. I've been ignoring you for weeks now.
You haven't been ignoring me, Amelia said without looking back at him. You've just been having some busy days. Granted, that's not your fault, Captain. You should try delegating a bit more.
Rain shook his head as he clambered over the supplies, his progress made difficult by the low awning. He switched tactile transference back on as he dropped down to the control platform. There was only one chair, situated in front of an expansive dashboard, now complete with a windshield. Subtlety could move alarmingly fast when it wasn't towing a couple hundred wagons, so the glass barrier was basically necessary. That reminds me, I need to talk to Myth to see if he's finally done something about those potion glass visor plates I asked him for. It's been ages. Oh, I should check out how his crystals are growing too. I need diodes. Damn it. And Tallheart can't do a thing with silicon other than complain about it confusing his skills. Stupid metalloid. Rumble, grumble, grumble. Later. He walked across the platform, stopping right behind Amelia atop the hatch that led to the vehicle's interior. Only then did she turn to peer at him, taking a hand from the controls to brush a strand of hair from her face.
Hey,
Rain said, smiling goofily. He couldn't help it. She was so beautiful. He raised a hand, conjuring a trio of perception accolades, before offering them to her. Here. Amelia raised an eyebrow, taking the plates.
What am I supposed to do with these?
That should be obvious. Reaching around the headrest, he placed his hands on her shoulders, and began massaging them through her armor.
Oh,
Amelia said with a smile. Rain could feel the softness of her skin through the metal, so he knew her armor's sensory enchantment was active. The accolade she was holding vanished, and she gasped, then let out a low moan.
Oh, that feels amazing. Ow! No, don't stop. Just not so hard. Ah, yes, like that.
Rain grinned. Remember to watch the road. Skills. Aura Metamagic, Tier 0. Extend Aura 12 out of 15. Amplify Aura 11 out of 15. Tier 1. Aura Synergy, 20 out of 15. Aura Focus, 11 out of 15. Tier 2. Aura IFF, 12 out of 15. Prismatic Intent, 1 out of 15. Tier 3. Aura Compression, 10 out of 15. Defensive Auras. Tier 1. Mental Ward, 10 out of 15. Arcane Ward, 10 out of 15. Chemical Ward, 10 out of 15. Tier 2. Force Ward, 10 out of 15. Tier 3. Suppression, 10 out of 15. Magical Utility, Tier 0. Intrinsic Clarity, 15 out of 15. Intrinsic Focus, 15 out of 15. Tier 1. Channel Mastery, 15 out of 15. Mana Manipulation, 10 out of 15. Tier 2. Magical Synergy, 15 out of 15. Offensive Auras. Tier 0. Immolate, 15 out of 15. Refrigerate, 15 out of 15. Tier 1. Radiance, 15 out of 15. Shroud, 11 out of 15. Tier 2. Fulmination, 10 out of 15. Utility Auras. Tier 0. Purify, 15 out of 15. Winter, 10 out of 15. Tier 1. Detection, 15 out of 15. Essence Well, 11 out of 15. Velocity, 10 out of 15. Free skill points, 4.